Hello, good afternoon, and welcome back to the Digital Pavilion. Well, welcome back. Welcome if you're joining us for the first time. It is our final session here. Thank you very much to KTN for putting this on.
My name's Suzie Imber, and this is
Dallas Campbell.
And we'll be hosting your event today.
We've got some fantastic speakers. If you've joined us for the last two sessions, you'll know what a fantastic, sessions we've been having. And of course, as we're coming now to the end of COP26, we've got some really interesting people to kind of sort of sum up what's been going on, discuss, are we feeling optimistic, are we feeling pessimistic? And of course, we're still going to be talking about our main themes, which is innovation and collaboration and sort of the politics of climate change. Coming up, we've got Sinead O'Sullivan, who's going to be talking about climate and complexity, just how complex the climate crisis is, how it involves many, many different aspects. We've got that coming up. We've got panel discussions as well, but we've got a bit of housekeeping first, as always.
Before we dive into some of these wonderful discussions, just to let you know that if you're joining us, you can ask a question at any point. We'll be monitoring the chat and the questions throughout the session. So if you have a question you want to ask, you can click on the Q&A box. If you have general chat for anybody, you can pop it into the chat. So
do we get to see the general chat? How does that work?
Yeah, we'll check it out. We'll check it out later. We'll certainly be monitoring the Q&A though. So if there's anything specifically you want to ask, put it in that Q&A box. And you can like other people's questions too, so that they rise to the top of our list.
Yeah, and if you do have a question, I mean, I've been slightly disappointed by the lack of questions. I think everyone's been a little bit shy asking questions. And I think if you do have a question, however general it is, if it's something that's bothering you, my motto is there's no such thing as a stupid question. Let's get it. We can put it to our fantastic panel that we've got coming up. Right, first up, we've got Stephen Ramage, who, well, Stephen, are you there? Who likes to describe himself as a Scot in Geneva. We had a quite long discussion before we came on about how to best introduce you, but I think I'm going to leave it to you to introduce yourself.
Thank you. That's not my favorite way to introduce
Isn't
myself.
it? What's your favorite way to introduce yourself?
Accidental geographer.
I like that. Is that your Twitter moniker? I think that's a very good one. Can I steal that?
Sure.
So what's a geographer like you doing in a place like this?
So I spent a long time working on digital mapping, working in software, and then sort of eventually ended up in the UN in New York. And I was doing some stuff with UNGGIM, which is the Global Geospatial Information Management, trying to essentially get geospatial or geography across the whole of the UN. Then this role came up in Geneva, and I headed over to Geneva November 2016.
But I think you're kind of officially a diplomat or vaguely a diplomat.
Yeah, we're hosted by the World Meteorological Organization, so I have a UN contract because I'm based there in Geneva. So that's kind of nice. We get the blue passport, so I've been using it to get in to the front of the queue all week.
Nice.
Why not?
Do you get like a free parking spot and that?
No, but it's not too expensive, and you get to go through the diplomatic channel at the airport. That's the best bit.
So have you been at COP? Have you been at COP for the whole shebang? Yeah. So you can just tell us a little bit about what your role has been over the last 2 weeks.
Yep. So GEO is described as an intergovernmental organization. So we are paid by countries, and we represent countries, and we work with countries to look at Earth observations. And for us, that's sensors in, on, around the Earth, not just satellite imagery, but it could be soil moisture, groundwater, etc.
And just for those who don't know, so GEO is Group on Earth Observation. Is that okay, good.
Exactly. And so one of the team that I lead is we're really looking at science and technology and how that supports policy. And we do that around global policy agendas. And the Paris Agreement is one of those global policy agendas. So the COP every year, the Conference of the Parties, is really a big event for us. It's something that is for all of our countries, because we have 120 countries they're all looking at. It's managed by the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, which has 197 countries that have ratified it. And those are the parties that I just talked about. So if I use the word parties, I'm essentially talking about the countries. And so we've been there in the blue zone, and the blue zone is where the negotiations take place. So you have to be accredited to get into the blue zone, and it can be quite a long process. And we've been there to work with the countries we work with, but also we work with many of the different UN bodies. So at the same time when UNFCCC came about, you also had UNCBD for the Convention on Biological Diversity and UNCCD, the Convention on to Combat Desertification. And so all of these are essentially looking at the sort of the health of our planet and what we're doing going forward as a result of what happened in Rio back in the 90s. So my role has been to work with a couple of colleagues. I had Sarah Venturini, who's our climate coordinator. She was with me, and Diana Mastracci, who's our Geo-Indigenous Alliance. The two of them have been there almost the whole time as well. And then obviously we have the countries. So we meet with many people, typically from the Ministries of Environment or from climate change or whatever, who are there. The sort of official stuff we've been doing is there's something called research and systematic observations under the UNFCCC, and at risk of sort of confusing you anymore, this is part of the subsidiary body for scientific and technological advice, which is known as SBSTA. But essentially, SBSTA is giving science and technology advice to those working in the other areas. And so we've been pushing, I mean, Earth observations has been part of that for a number of years. And so there are two parts that SBSTA runs. One is a research dialogue that happens every June. And then at the COP, since Marrakesh in 2016, they've been running Earth Information Day. So in Madrid, I chaired some of the discussions on data at Earth Information Day. And then this year, Sarah did a presentation on the work of GEO on mitigation and adaptation. And then I was part of the UK COP presidency session on Earth Information in the main plenary, I think in the afternoon of the same day. I've had like 15 events over as many days, you know, interviews, talks, moderating, etc., etc. So, but I think the important thing to share with you is that we released a report on greenhouse gas monitoring from space from public, private, and hybrid missions. And so that's really important because a lot of this is about how do we measure and monitor those different greenhouse gases, whether it's carbon dioxide, methane, or nitrous oxide. There are fluorocarbons and others, but we didn't put those in the report, only the first three. I'm sorry, that was a really long answer.
No,
that's okay.
Are you in Glasgow at the moment, by the way?
I'm actually in my mum and dad's house for the first time since October 2019. And I'm envisioning my mum come through the door with a cup of tea going, here you go, son.
Oh, that sounds nice.
With a cup of tea. And you're in Scotland?
I'm in Scotland, yeah. I've just come away from Glasgow this afternoon.
Nice. Well, we're in Edinburgh, and I think the best place to be in COP when it's in Glasgow is in Edinburgh. It's a bit like when you're at the Edinburgh Festival, the best place to be is in Glasgow.
Exactly.
But it sounds like you've been to many of these sort of meetings over the years, many COPs over the years. Tell us a bit about how COP has changed and evolved over time, and the differences between this COP you've just been to and some of the previous ones.
I think what I see is maybe the biggest. I mean, there are some things that have happened like through COVID. So live streaming has become something that is actually really opened up access. And so I think that's a good thing. And I see a lot more youth engagement. I see a lot more Indigenous engagement, community engagement. But I also see more lobbyists. So it's a real mix of more people coming in. In some ways, I did hear some people complaining it's become a bit of a circus and they wish it would get back to more of the focus on the negotiation.
That's quite interesting, actually, because a lot of people, when they watch things of COP on telly, they're going to see David Attenborough, pictures of polar bears, carving icebergs, Barack Obama, Al Gore. They're going to get all these big Greta Thunberg. Do you think that's, in a way, overshadowing things, maybe? Or
no, I don't. Personally, I think it's important because I think it brings more context. And I think, you know, there are ways we can do things as individuals to support, you know, with our purchasing power and how we spend, how we consume stuff, and also with our feet through voting. But if you don't understand what the issues are, then how can you vote correctly?
Yeah.
So I think as long as it's managed appropriately, I mean, you know, you have the blue zone and you have the green zone, and then you have all the stuff. It's kind of funny because people put COP26 and actually all they're doing is running an event in a hotel. And I understand why they're doing it, but I think that's kind of good because it is absolutely raising awareness about the issues.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the single biggest challenges.
Well, I mean, the fact that we're at COP26, I mean, most people I don't think have even heard of COP. I mean, my mother has never heard of any of the COP. And here we are at number 26 before people are actually kind of taking notice of it. So I guess those big names and the kind of hoopla circus is, like you say, pretty important.
But I think also, like, I mean, I've been involved in a lot of private sector stuff here, and I think that's a big change as well. There's definitely, I think one of the first times I remember seeing the private sector actually present at Substa in the official meetings. So I think all of that is progress. You know, there's certainly an element of people have to get used to. They've been using national data for many years from the government for all of this stuff. And now if you look at what's happening in space, and you look at what's happening specifically in the Earth observation community, it's like the golden era of Earth observations. And the money that's coming in, and the science and the technology, and it is going so fast. You know, it's really incredibly hard to keep up with it. And so bringing the private sector in, I think, the timing is good, but it's going to take a while for that trust to put together, you know, those data that are outside the country and aggregate them with the statistics and other data that they have themselves.
We're talking a little bit, and we've talked over the last week actually about data, the importance of accessing data and the new data that's available. I wonder if you can expand a bit on sort of the role of space data and how it's changed over the last 5 years.
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to give credit and kudos to organizations like European Space Agency. They've brought, you know, the Copernicus program has just dramatically changed. I mean, we had, many people in Earth observations have been working with Landsat, which came out in, you know, that actually show my age here, the year after I was born in 1972. And people have been working with Landsat for many years, and they have an amazing open data program. And actually the open data arrangement for Landsat was signed at Geo in 2007 by the former director, Barb Bryan, who was also the Landsat director at USGS. And so the work of Landsat, the work of Copernicus, and then I think there's been a huge amount of work on research in those two areas. But then we made some announcements at our plenary a couple of years ago about Gaofen in China, ALOS in Japan, and more of this data, CompSat in Korea, more and more of this data becoming available. And I think what you've seen is a growth of many analytics companies as well, who are making sense of that data. I mean, in Scotland, you know, has got this space race, and Scotland's doing some amazing stuff. I had a couple of pints with the guys at Space Intelligence the other day, and it's just really incredibly hard to keep up. You know, Alba Orbital came to a session we ran last night, and there are some industry commentators, you know, putting out stuff on Twitter and blog posts and stuff. But I think the public-private, not just from the data policy perspective, but also now you have organizations like Planet who are calibrating and putting their data together with some of the Sentinel data from Copernicus. And so you're getting increased coverage, you're getting more timely coverage, you're getting greater resolution, different spectral, you know, the technology's improved, the science has improved, people are sharing stuff. You have communities like the Open Source Geospatial Foundation, OSGeo, with tens of thousands of people. And so everybody is now realizing, you know, we have this PPP, this public-private partnership that's really starting to come together. And one of the events this week, we had Climate Trace with Al Gore, we had Climate Tracker, we have Carbon Mapper. We have all of these different coalitions coming together. And also the rate of acquisition, you know, just yesterday, Planet bought a company, you know, people are like, you know, they're putting company kind of like effectively on the stock market, but the money that's going in now is just, it's amazing. It's in billions of dollars.
Actually, I guess all these data sources, you know, they bring amazing opportunities, but there are also challenges. They're making us change the way that we do data analysis, I guess. We have to assimilate such a massive amount of data points. We have so much data available. We're inventing, I guess, new ideas about how we analyze data with big data and baselining these different data sets. So I guess it's an exciting time, I guess, to be working in this sector.
I think it is. I mean, I used to work, I think Nadine's speaking at some point. I used to be one of the executive directors at the OGC, the Open Geospatial Consortium. And we all talked for years and years about interoperability, you know, about semantics, the meaning of data, or syntactics, the structure of data. And I've been talking the last 10 years about human interoperability, because we have the data, we've got tons of data, and we've got petabytes of, or, you know, even just from single missions, we've got these like millions and millions and millions of data. But the issues around data access and data sharing are about motivation and incentives, and about people working together. And so that's why I've been trying to promote this concept of human interoperability, and trying to drive, you know, more and more, so people understand like what happens if I share my data. And people have issues around quality, and there's perceptions of, you know, data having to be perfect versus just good enough. So that's something I'm quite keen to try and drive much more of the social aspect of what we're doing.
You've been part of the negotiations, and I'm just wondering, as we kind of come to the end of COP, what your thoughts of what a good COP will look like. I mean, is there such a thing? Is there, you know, COP obviously doesn't have a sort of target like Paris had a target. It does seem to be a little bit more amorphous. I'm just wondering what a good COP looks. Good cop as opposed to bad cop.
I knew you were going to say that. I knew you were going to say that.
I didn't. That was an accidental sort of pun. But what's a good cop for you?
So COP26 wasn't really supposed to result in a new treaty.
No, exactly.
It was meant to advance ambition and to kind of close some of the outstanding issues. I mean, right now there's a ministerial taking place on something called Article 6, which is a UN mechanism to trade credits for emission reductions. And there are, you know, for the first time, the terms like fossil fuels and the level of investment that's going in, particularly being aligned with Indigenous communities and others, I think those are changes. And I think the pledges and the outcomes should be good and should be meaningful. But if you go on any social media channel or read any newspaper, it'll be about implementation and about follow-up. So making sure that all these pledges and everything are maintained, and making sure that, I mean, I hosted on this channel a couple of days ago, I hosted a 2.5-hour session on Indigenous communities. And people were saying that, you know, even if there's $1 billion that's going towards them from some fund, how can you make sure that it doesn't get held up in the people who are trying to administer the fund and taking a huge cut, or if that actually gets to the right people for the right purpose at the right time, etc., etc., etc. So I think it's really all about this kind of implementation, and that's for me is I think bringing all the people together has definitely been good, and it's essential, because if we didn't have the COP, people would try and invent something else. So yes, it's cumbersome. Yes, it's full of officialdom and it's quite narrow in scope, but the ramifications and implications are enormous. So I think, and this is where, if I go back to Earth observations, if you look at the work we're doing, you know, broadly with geospatial, with geographic information, whether it's, you know, I was listening to some of the urban stuff, so looking at the digital twins, or, you know, using national mapping from Ordnance Survey or whoever it is to provide some of that baseline data, and then using the Earth observations to then bring in more of the data about what's actually happening that we can see from space. I think there's a lot still for us to do to support the science and the technology going towards policy and implementation. I mean, this is really a 10-page summary that, you know, you're asking me to write here. I mean, we could put it in a blog post or something, but I mean, it's an enormous level of activity. And even now, after, you know, kind of 12 days in Glasgow, I'm still trying to sort of figure out all the different discussions I've had. You know, like someone came to me after one of the sessions and invited me to Egypt to brief the new African Space Agency and a whole pile of other people. And that wouldn't have happened if we hadn't all been here. And then they can learn about what we're doing, what data, what tools, what
that's great.
Are available to them.
So as a sort of networking tool, it seems to have been pretty successful.
Yeah, I think so, because there is a lot of open data. There are services. You know, a lot of people are doing this stuff to sort of save humanity without, there's no other way to put it. People talk about saving the planet, but the planet's going to be fine. It's us humans that are the ones that are knackered. So,
hey, listen, we're running out of time, Stephen, but listen, thank you so much. If you're in Edinburgh, by the way, we're in Edinburgh. We're doing a thing tonight if you want to pop by and say, we're at the conference centre if you want to pop by and say hello, if you leave your mum's bedroom.
But thank you so much again for joining us. Really appreciate your insights. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Stephen. It's been terrific. Thank you very,
Thanks,
very
guys.
much
Good
indeed.
luck.
Thank you.
Bye.
Yeah, take
Thanks.
care.
So who do we have up next, Alice?
Well, we've got Sinead O'Sullivan, aerospace engineer and chief strategist at the Institute for Strategy and Competitiveness at the Harvard Business School. Are you there? Where is she? Is there? She is there.
Hi, good morning.
Hey, listen, thank you very, very much. I've been so looking forward to your talk because really, I suppose you're going to be talking about climate and complexity. I think people think of climate as just kind of a single thing, but you're going to talk to us a little bit about how all the different bits get tangled and messy. But I think you've got a few very beautiful slides to show us first, just to set out your stall. I've had a look at your slides, and we both had slide envy.
It's true.
You had the nicest slides we've seen this week. So
That is quite the compliment, Alice. Thank you. I am going to say there is a leaf blower that has just started.
Of course there is.
We've got like weird announcements at the conference centre. So between us, we've got all weird noises covered.
Well, firstly, let me get to the presentation. So good afternoon, and Dallas, Suzie, thank you so much for having me. It has been an amazing couple of weeks. I just want to tip my hat to Stephen. Sorry, we have a leaf blower and now
leaf blower and a frog in your throat.
Stephen, amazing summary there of what I think has been the busiest. I hope it's the busiest 2 weeks of your life, because oh my God, you've been doing so much stuff. So thanks for summarizing that so nicely for us. So the reason that COP is such a big conference, and it is absolutely massive, and as Stephen said, it is so big this year, is that it impacts, and the impacts of climate change are touching every aspect of our lives. And, we're starting to even experience this ourselves now. So it is a multifaceted problem. And I'm just going to take a few minutes at the beginning, and then I think we're going to have a quick chat afterwards to briefly outline some of the complexities of the problem that we are trying to solve. So as you mentioned, it's not just one entity of climate change, but it actually impacts us in lots of different ways. The climate crisis that we're facing right now is the result of a changing climate, and that changing climate is a complex system and therefore must be treated like one. And while this may sound very obvious, and I don't think anybody would disagree with this statement, we are yet to start designing a response that really deals with the complex nature of this crisis, and that is a problem. So a complex system is a lot more than just a lot of parts together. What makes a system complex is how those parts are connected and relate to each other. So, for example, complex systems often show signs of being nonlinear. So what do I mean by this? I basically mean that the impact of a global warming increase to 3 degrees is not double the impact of an increase to 1.5 degrees. It's actually catastrophically greater. The crisis is emergent in nature. So this kind of means that we don't fully understand the ways in which it's going to show itself. We don't really understand what the downstream impacts of it are going to be, although we're starting to see some of them now, and they are catastrophic. It is cascading in that, which starts as a climate crisis, and it very quickly, as we're starting again to see, turns into a humanitarian crisis, and then it turns into an economic crisis, and it turns into a political crisis and a social unrest crisis, and so on and so forth. So we know also that there are feedback loops that make this kind of the negative impacts of the changing climate worse and worse and worse, until we reach this kind of tipping point. And people are saying that we're very close to that tipping point right now, where it's kind of too late to go back to where we've come from before. So when we think about the general direction in which we're moving, we are absolutely moving towards a world that feels like it is out of control and is unstable. now we start to think, what does that look like? Because I guess in this industry, we do a lot of looking at how things look. It may be easy to do this with geospatial data, but however, complex systems mean that we need to start thinking more about downstream and higher order impacts. And how do we know what those look like? And how do we think about looking at those? Because there are many, many dimensions to climate change. So in late October, 18 US intelligence agencies forecast that Americans are going to face massive impacts and wrenching adjustments because of climate change over the next 2 decades alone. The critical threats to the habitability of the planet is a central threat in and of itself, but is also going to create a multitude of new security challenges while exacerbating the existing ones. And there are a lot of existing ones. So the most immediate effect of climate change looks like it's going to be internal conflict within the nation state. Modeling suggests that changing climate patterns could give up to 50% increase in conflict in sub-Saharan Africa alone. We know that these types of changing climates have resulted before in crises in Syria and other places. The patterns of war that we've seen already suggest that the effects of this are not going to be limited to individual countries that are affected. So what happens in sub-Saharan Africa will not stay in sub-Saharan Africa. It will spread both within Africa and beyond by the vectors of kind of transnational terrorism, which we've been living with for decades, and especially by mass migration. Excuse me, I'm so sorry. So one of the largest impacts of climate change that I think we're going to see in the developed economy is that, we're expecting that it could wipe up to 18% of GDP of the global economy by 2050. This is if global temperatures rise by 3.2%. Again, it's very unlikely unless we change a lot that we're even going to meet those targets. 18% of global GDP is massive. It's a very huge number, and it's hard to think about what that actually looks like. But we can think about the second and higher order impacts of this being slower economies, increased unemployment, increased inequality, and massively increased global poverty. And so wiping off decades of progress that we've made so far. This crisis obviously needs urgent global cooperation between states. And that is kind of, one of the mechanisms or one of the outcomes of COP and the point of COP. However, we are now entering this kind of period of increased great power competition between East and West. So trade tensions, the decline of multilateral cooperation, increased isolationist policies are going to make it really, really difficult to cooperate when we are actually starting to compete more along dimensions of economic and energy market shares. So what does this mean for the geospatial community? We already know that you cannot improve what you cannot measure. So we're already doing this really, really well. The community serves as the eyes and ears of this crisis. There's no doubt about that, helping us to better understand it. But as we can see, the new emergent threats cannot be viewed anymore through traditional geospatial impacts. Second, and higher impacts are going to be very difficult to see through those traditional ways. So we're now kind of entering this new paradigm of needing to bring this technology within the sector and these capabilities that we have horizontally across sectors in nearly every domain. In the same way that there are kind of, you used to hear about AI companies. Now you don't really hear about AI companies anymore because every company is essentially using AI and is now an AI company. So in the future, I see that there are, these kind of climate or geospatial companies are going to disappear, not disappear, but are going to become so ubiquitous that every company is inherently dealing with climate and utilizing these technologies. So this is going to be a huge challenge for the industry to make that transition. but at the same time is an overwhelming opportunity to kind of expand the work that we're doing and that has been done for so long in the geospatial domain, and to kind of bring it out into the mainstream, both in the technology and how it's commercialized. And so on that, I'll conclude. Thank you again so much for having me, and we can now continue the discussion around some of the points that Stephen mentioned, and the idea of needing to tackle this complexity urgently.
Thank you so much for that introduction. That's absolutely brilliant. Thank you so much. I guess I kind of want to build on this idea of, if you can't measure it, we don't have the data that we need to tackle the issues that you're talking about, incredibly complex issues. And we discussed a bit about different data sets. I wonder what your thoughts are on the role of NASA and NOAA and other government agencies versus the role of the private sector in collecting this data and making data available more broadly.
Yeah, so I mean, like Stephen mentioned before me, public-private partnerships are an incredibly important mechanism that we have to try to deal with some of the complexities of this. Traditionally, I think we've seen a lot of reliance on government agencies. And what I'm particularly excited about now is this kind of emerging role of the private sector. And I think that is going to become a very prominent theme moving forward because, for a couple of different reasons. One is that, I think Morgan Stanley's latest report cites that we need $53 trillion moving into enabling this new climate and energy transition. $53 trillion is, that's not just the government, that's the private sector, that's the markets, that's startups, that's innovation. And importantly, it's working together to make sure that every dollar that's spent is more efficient today than it was before. So what I'm really interested in, and at Harvard, I'm working with a very new organization called Acropolis that really turns the traditional capitalism model on its head and looks at how to create stakeholder primacy so that we can take private companies that not only kind of create these above market returns, but also start to do some of this really important work. And I think a lot of the future of the geospatial industry is going to be along these lines. So, startups, super exciting. Like you said, we're starting to see so much M&A activity, and it's really exciting. And I think the private sector is really going to start to have a massive role to play in this.
Yeah, it seems it's not just we have to dismantle the way we use energy. We have to basically dismantle society and start again. Essentially, we have to sort of get rid of capitalism and come up with something else, or redesign it in a more fundamental way.
Yeah, I mean, so I'm at Harvard Business School. I can't, I'm not going to say let's get rid of capitalism altogether. But I do, when it comes to complex crises, we know already that what does not work is more of the same. Okay.
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
And so what we need to start doing is fundamentally saying, well, who are the stakeholders that we're trying to benefit? And how can we change slightly the model that we're using to make sure that we're not optimizing for a single point of efficiency, which is what we've been doing for decades. Instead, we're optimizing for many different points. We're creating resiliency within our economy. We have, not only one type of data or one contractor, we have many, and that these solutions become competitive. One of, we hear a lot at the minute about individual companies, or individuals, Elon Musk, for example, saving humanity. But think about it, what would happen if there were 10 Elon Musks and we were able to drive the efficiencies and the competitiveness of that even further? So I totally agree that we cannot keep doing more of the same, because that's not going to move the needle. I think we need to really start thinking about, what does that alternative model look like? Because we can't just get rid of the system that we're in, but we do need to urgently change it.
No, we've got a few questions coming in. Suzie, if you want to.
Yeah, one's just popped in asking about whether you could give us a bit more of a detailed look at the potential internal conflict in sub-Saharan Africa. The question is, do you know which countries will be affected first or more than others? Perhaps you can't be that specific, but if you could explain a little bit more about how you see events unfolding in that part of the world, that would be really insightful. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. So I'm going to talk more broadly about, so I'm a senior fellow at the US Center for Climate and Security. And so there I look at, I'm their kind of space or geospatial person. And so we look broadly there at internal conflicts in, abroad, and how those internal conflicts impact US national security or homeland security. And very simply, you can see that changing resources, decreasing critical resources in certain locations, we call them epicenters, have drastic impacts globally, because we now live in this very globalized world. And again, we've created this global system that relies on efficiency against one or two different metrics. So once you start to change the resource distribution in these epicenters, sub-Saharan Africa being one of them, different locations in Asia. And again, these are also geographic areas which are the most at threat of climate and then further resource insecurity. So that leads to mass migration, that leads to internal conflict. You're moving basically through that mass migration, the conflict, and it becomes, we saw what happened with Syria as a result of drought and food shortages, and that to this day has impacted security, not just in the US and not just in the Middle East, but globally.
Sinead, thank you so much. We're slightly running out of time, but Stephen gave us a really good sort of upsum of his thoughts on as we come to the end of COP. And actually, sort of listening to you, there was a lot of pessimism, I suppose, in terms of the scale of what we're up against.
Realism, actually.
Well, realism. Okay, realism. But I'm just wondering, from the last couple of weeks, from your point of view, have you seen anything that makes you go, actually, you know what, this is doable? There are certain things that are doable. Are there any bright points on the horizon from where you're standing?
Yeah, so yes, this is not a very optimistic presentation for sure. On the one hand, I feel very strongly that we're maybe moving down the path of not critically changing the mechanisms that we are using to deal with this in the way that we need to. On the other hand, I see, and that's a very top-down perspective. But if we look from the bottom up, it's very optimistic, because look at how many people have been, exactly as Stephen said, look at how many people have been interested or aware of COP. What I'm really excited about is the new people that are moving into the geospatial sector, massive talent. And it's not just engineering talent, it's finance talent, it's marketing talent, it's the professionalization and distribution of this sector into nearly every other sector. It's very exciting. And I think more generally, the people that are going to be taking the reins in the next generation are really, really on top of and excited about solving these things, which is really, really exciting.
Fantastic. That's a great summary. Thank you so much, Sinead, again for joining us. Really fascinating discussion. Thank you so much. And so coming up next.
Yeah, coming up next. Yeah, thank you, Sinead. Absolutely brilliant. We've got our kind of 1 minute sum up baton relay. It's yes. Kind of a relay. I'm not quite sure exactly how we're going to do it.
Our friends and partners are going to give us a brief presentation.
Exactly. So we've got 3 friends and partners. We've got Adina Gillespie, Chris Hobbs, and Amanda Campbell, who've got a minute each to set out their stall eloquently, humorously, however you want to do it. But we're gonna start with Adina first. Adina Gillespie from GHGSat.
Hey, thanks, Dallas. Thanks, Susie. No pressure there on being funny and creative and entertaining all at the same time. We're not all trained like you, but here we'll give it a try. So I'm just going to really build quickly on the comments from Sinead a minute ago. Yeah, there's so much great talent coming in. I mean, in GHGSat, we just pulled a data analytics specialist from Facebook and one from the financial services sector too. So it's exciting, lots of things happening. So I get my 1 minute to talk about some cool stuff happening in GHGSat. Let me go. So there are just three things I want to say. One is that our constellation of satellites, so we've got 3 up there now already collecting high resolution measurements of methane emissions from industrial facilities. So the Sustainable Development Technology Canada has put $20 million towards building out that constellation and the ground segment data analytics. So that was exciting this week. We also announced that Environment and Climate Change Canada and GHGSat will be providing our data to the UN's International Methane Emissions Observatory that launched last week. And then the third thing is quite cool, actually. There should be a link to a podcast in your chat. And that podcast is one that has just been released about 5 minutes ago. So you're the first to know. It'll be on social networking next week, but I just thought folks here would be interested. It's a podcast about geospatial data for climate action. And it's an interview with our president and founder, Stéphane Germain, alongside the president and founder of Esri. So that's Jack Dangermond. And for those of you that aren't familiar with Esri, it's like the Microsoft of geography and geospatial data. So it should be really cool. I encourage everyone to have a listen. And now I'll pass over to my good friend and colleague, Chris Hobbs from the Catapult.
Thank you very much, Adina. So I'm Chris Hobbs. I'm from the Satellite Applications Catapult. Welcome, everybody, and I want to tell you about the Forest Mine project. It's hard to determine which products have been grown on deforested land. We're partnering with the UK and Europe's best mines to help rid the world of deforestation in the commodity supply chain. Forest Mine's traceability tools will enable food retailers and supply chain companies to have full transparency, key commodities from farm to plate. Our unique combination of satellite imagery, other data, geospatial data layers, and machine learning tracing applications enables Forest Mine to provide food chains with the legislative clarity required to ensure compliance now and in the future. The work is supported by the European Space Agency, and the UK Space Agency will provide actionable insights. It will deliver end user requirements such as verifying supply chains, enhancing supply chain management, demonstrating progress on commitments and managing reputational risk, supporting environmental protection, enabling legislative compliance. Please contact me to learn more about our development roadmap, how you can become involved, and how we can help to address the sourcing locations and regions that concern you. Thank you very much. I'm going to pass over now to Amanda Campbell.
Thanks. Hi, everyone. So we're drawing to an end of COP, and through the successful collaboration at Glasgow, we now have more clarity on climate policies. Businesses now also have more certainty, and this will fuel innovation and accelerate climate solutions. This digital pavilion has demonstrated the strength of capabilities from our sector and touched on potential innovations and climate solutions. However, it's clear from the outcomes of COP that we all need to do much more. We need to scale current solutions and keep innovating. We're at a pivotal moment, and now has to be the decade of delivery. Everyone and every company has a critical part to play, and we're only going to be successful if we work together. Just like many other sectors, from mining, universities, even religious groups, we're calling for a net zero space coalition. We will work together to address emission challenges within our value chain, from manufacturing, launch, down to digital and data applications, supporting all sizes of companies to meet evolving regulatory and procurement policies. Through new and strengthened partnerships, we will drive new opportunities. The Net Zero Space Coalition will also focus on identifying where space technology and the wider ecosystem can deliver high-impact climate change solutions for all sectors. We will work with and build on existing collaborations, including ESA's Sustainability Charter, Space for Climate, and Climate Trace. If you want to be part in shaping or participating in the Net Zero Space Coalition, please express interest via the link in the chat. It's for everyone in the space technology ecosystem, and you don't have to be a decision maker in your organization to find out more. Let's continue to work together to deliver impactful climate solutions enabled and empowered by space technology. Now passing over to, who am I passing over to? To Anthony.
To Anthony. We were worried we
Anthony.
didn't have him, but we have him.
Or if
Here.
you have Anthony's
Thank
voice,
you.
we may not have his picture. Anthony.
Can you see and hear me? Is that
We
good?
can see and hear you, yes.
Oh, brilliant. Yeah, no, I've been running around trying to get connectivity, and I even got thrown out of the cafe. Anyway, so Satellite View, as a company with a mission to provide thermal imagery and insights to enable the reduction of carbon emissions and energy wastage, we want to ensure that we practice what we preach. That's why we've begun creating our own Satellite View Net Zero Emissions Plan to ensure that over the coming months, our fast-growing team can continue to operate without doing unnecessary harm to the environment. This initiative isn't just about reducing carbon waste and cutting unnecessary travel to the office. It's to ensure that we're fully accountable to our customers, investors, and the wider public. We're putting the time and effort into getting it right. And this isn't just another gimmick or headline grabbing initiative. The team is working to ensure our guidelines are practical and effective. Many companies out there are offering catchy green slogans and environmental pledges, but we're preparing to publish our own mission targets, data and performance results on Satellite View's website. So anyone who can check us out and see how we're doing. These are very exciting times for the company. So these early commitments will ensure that even if we expand and increase the size of the team, green credentials remain in our DNA. Such programs don't happen overnight, but we'll be constantly seeking new ways to improve on our performance in this area, especially as the company enters the next phase of growth. And I'm not sure who to hand over to.
You're handing back to us. Thank you so much, Anthony. And thank you to all of our friends and partners for those announcements and that little relay there. If you want to find out more about any of these partners, you can do so via the Pavilion. They're all at Digital Pavilion. So do go to their websites or go back to the Pavilion and find out more about some of our partners there. Yes,
Definitely do that. Thank you very much indeed. Right, we've got a couple of videos for you now. After that, we're going to have a panel discussion. But we've got a couple of videos. We've got an intro video from KTN, of course, our host. But before that, actually, Stephen mentioned the Scotland space race, which yes. I quite like that. I quite like that as a sort of title. So we've got a video from Space Scotland first.
Hi, I'm Daniel from AstroAgency.
And I'm Christina from the University of Edinburgh.
And together we chair the Environmental Task Force for Space Scotland.
The Environmental Task Force has representation from each part of the space sector, so upstream, downstream and in orbit, and Scottish Government and Scottish Enterprise as well.
And at the moment, what we're looking for is companies, organisations to get involved to help support the work that we're doing, to move everything forward as we look to build the first sustainable space strategy in the UK and potentially anywhere around the world. So please get in touch. Go to the scottishspace.org website if you'd like to join the task force, and we hope to hear from you soon.
Thank you.
Great stuff. Always nice to hear about what's going on in Scotland. We actually have another quick video for you now, brought to us by KTN, our hosts here at the Digital Pavilion. Brilliant. Thank you very much indeed for those. We're kind of almost, we're sort of coming to the final furlong of our session here in the Digital Pavilion here at the Edinburgh Conference Centre, which is where we are today. But we've got a sort of final panel discussion, which is really going to be about
people's final thoughts about the Digital Pavilion, people's final thoughts about COP generally. We have Bryony Turner from Space for Climate. We've got Alistair Graham from Sparkgeo. We've got Nadine Alame from OGC. I think just before we start, if you want to sort of just very briefly, in a single line, introduce yourselves and who you are and who you represent and what your interests are. So perhaps with Bryony first.
Hey everyone,
Hi Bryony.
Greetings from the Green Zone at COP26. I manage the Space for Climate group that unites UK expertise in space-enabled climate data and services.
Thank you very much, Bryony. Alistair, hello.
Hi there, how are you doing?
Very well.
Yes, so I'm Alistair Graham. I'm the UK lead of Sparkgeo, which is a geospatial services company, basically creating the glue that brings the data and the compute together. And in my sort of personal life as well, I also host an Earth observation podcast called Seen from Above. So some people on this might have heard me from there.
We will get it in the chat room. We'll get it in the chat and then people can listen to it. Brilliant. And then finally, Nadine.
Hi, happy to be here. Nadine Alame, the CEO of the Open Geospatial Consortium, OGC. We are a global not-for-profit consortium. I like to think of us as a collective problem-solving community of geospatial experts and users, connecting using standards, best practices, and proofs of concept, all based on fair, findable, accessible, interoperable, reusable data information systems.
Wow, fantastic stuff. So thank you so much for joining us today. Now, I know that you're all actual partners in our pavilion, and I'm interested in finding a little bit more about the sessions that you've particularly enjoyed, what you've got out of the pavilion over the last sort of week and a half. And maybe we'll throw back to Bryony to start off with. What are your thoughts on the pavilion, Bryony? Oh, perhaps Bryony can't hear us. Well, let's go to Alistair first in that case. Can you hear us, Alistair?
Yeah, I can hear you fine. Yeah, it's been an amazing 2 weeks, and there have been so many different sessions that have really engaged me and a lot of the people that I've spoken to as well. But I think one of the things that's really key, and this isn't just from this pavilion, but it's almost the geospatial sector itself, is just how friendly it is and also the diversity within it. And I think that's one thing that we really need to try and make sure is promoted more, is the fact that we have a diversity of age. So I was hosting a session where I was talking to people about trying to get students up into geospatial and interested in climate and that sort of thing. And it was amazing talking to people about sort of how engaged people of the age of sort of 16 to 18 are, but also in that 21 to 25 space. And then you've got people who are coming back into the industry as well at an older age. And then we've got also cultural and geographical diversity. There's loads more that needs to be done on that. I mean, I'm not saying that's sorted in any way at all, but we're definitely a very diverse group of people. And then we have a diversity in skills. It was mentioned earlier in this session that there's people coming into the sector bringing in their skills. So I think that's one of the really big positives.
That's really, I mean, it's been such a big theme of this whole, well, the pavilion and I think COP generally, this idea of collaboration, of people working together. And the thing that I've sort of taken away is it's just provided this kind of node for people to kind of talk and meet each other and share ideas.
Yeah, and this idea of interdisciplinary science and the fact that actually none of us can sit in a silo and solve these problems on our own. We need to work together, but how do we facilitate that?
Exactly. As one of the young people coming through in the industry. Brian, you're in the kind of hot seat there. You're in the kind of bear pit, as it were. Just let us know your thoughts.
So, I mean, we've been really struck both on stand and in the events I've been able to participate in about really the positive reception and the interest, not just from those in the climate sector, but those members of the public, those in local groups, local community groups, wanting to know more about Earth observation and geospatial data, how they can access it. In fact, I think you can see in the background I put, because I'm actually in the cupboard on stand.
Oh, I thought you were there. Oh, I didn't realize it was a fake background. You've burst my bubble.
It was on Indigenous Peoples Day, and this was a representative from a Brazilian Indigenous group, and they were absolutely wowed by the fact there is the satellite data going over their land and their area that they want to access and use for their own climate action and climate resilience. And we're here today. We've actually had the London Climate Change Partnership, and it's been Built Environment Day at COP. And there's a lot of geospatial uses, particularly for helping the built environment sector, for instance, get to net zero, but also make sure that we are resilient to the level of climate change that's actually occurring. So sort of in summary, I think there's the group that I coordinate covers the science and the industry and the government side of things. From the science perspective, I think we had the very strong messages on deforestation and methane, and those are two areas that the Earth observation sector is already very strong in being able to support, and we need to do more to help with that. And then I think we've had a lot of interest on the Earth observation data for nature-based solutions, particularly around forest trees, peatlands, coastal environments, and ocean health. And then also for public health, that's been really interesting in the green zone. We've had a lot of public health organizations and groups. So what has come through, and particularly in yesterday's event that we ran with the Global Partnership Sustainable Development Data, was that we need to stop working as individual entities. It's one of the reasons Space for Climate exists, to help people to collaborate, bring together their different capabilities to the table. We don't have time to continue this lag. We need to move very quickly, and that needs collaboration and transparency and traceability in the products and services being used. So we really welcome a lot of the announcements that have happened this week with that regard, and we need to not just leave it at COP. This is just the start of us needing to speed this up, not just domestically, but internationally.
Fantastic. And I think actually this pavilion has been in response to exactly what you've been describing, which is a need for people to communicate better, collaborate better, and provide a platform in which we can all have a conversation and find out what everyone else is doing and work together.
Yeah, and again, as you say, a kind of window for the geospatial community. It has been a brilliant shop window. People in the public who perhaps weren't really aware of what the industry did, and things like Earth observation. It's not obvious, it's like my mother has no idea what on earth.
But Earth observation, for planning, for health.
Yeah, exactly. Just
so many things.
For so many things, exactly. Nadine, your thoughts.
Yes, so I'm a big geo cheerleader, geospatial cheerleader. I should have pom-poms here in my office. So I'm very appreciative actually of this Space and Geospatial Pavilion, because to me, this week or the last 10 days proved that this is an expert, global, connected community who in many ways have been preparing for years for this moment of impact. We are experts at data integration across disciplines. We're experts at complex analysis at many levels, local, global. We have been dealing with big data for years, for decades, right? In space and in time. And obviously, I think both Alistair and Bryony mentioned, we care, we really care. So I think our biggest strength coming together is that we can accelerate, right? We can accelerate things. We can accelerate providing the decision makers, the politicians with the information. We call it decision-ready information that they need, because there's so much happening. Space, in situ, Internet of Things, I mean, you name it, everything is geospatial. My only message is sometimes in our excitement and cheerleading, we make it look like we've got it all figured out, but actually that's not the case. There's still a lot of work that we need to do. There's investment in how do you connect the pieces, and a shameless plug here for the standards, the real glue that connect this amazing ecosystem that's going at a speed of of our Earth, right, of our climate, and involves way more than geospatial.
Brilliant. Listen, thank you very, very much for all your thoughts. No need to apologise for shameless plugs. It's all good.
Yes.
And we sort of just very briefly, perhaps a kind of a word each. Has COP been good for you? Do you feel sort of optimistic? I mean, all the kind of messages, particularly on social media, has been a real mixed bag of just the scale of what it is we're dealing with, but then scattered with little gems of optimism as well in terms of things that might be able to do. Just are you just very briefly a word each about how optimistic or pessimistic you are about the state of play? We'll go with Alistair first.
Yeah, generally optimistic. It's always good to approach things in an optimistic manner. I think the most important thing is to link what we're doing in geospatial with organizations that are actually doing something on the ground. We can provide all the data in the world, and we will do, but unless someone is acting on it, then I don't think it's going to go anywhere.
So action, a little less conversation, a little more action.
Definitely.
As somebody once sang, I forget who it was.
I think Elvis, isn't it?
I think it was definitely Elvis. It was in his larger phase. Bryony.
So I'm very positive because we've seen so many members of the public, different generations coming through and wanting to understand more and use the data. I'd say there was a 4-year-old that came on stand and gave Professor Chris Merchant from the University of Reading quite the inquisition about his sea surface temperature data.
That's just showing off. Honestly, come on, you're 4 years old.
Amazing.
However, what I'd say is we can't leave it to the younger. We can't leave it to the younger generation. We've got to get on now. And I think one of the things I've seen missing from this COP is the role of the partnership bodies to help broker exactly what was just mentioned between those that have the data and are desperately keen to help those that want to make use of it. So we actually need more government support in that. And the other thing I'd say for the geospatial community is it's not all about new projects and initiatives. We need climate funds to recognize that data sustainment is incredibly important for being able to monitor the efficacy and learn from which climate actions are working. And we need not just the data supply chain to evolve, but we need the financing of it too. There's the government effort to particularly finance the ongoing science, but with this information being used for services all around the world, from housing to public health, we really need to make sure that there are custodians keeping it open access and sustaining it, and that is viewed as an important part of climate action.
Absolutely, couldn't agree more on that. Thank you, Bryony. And Nadine.
Yeah, I would add to that. I would echo that big time. I would like to see optimistic, of course, because at least we're having the conversation. I'm a concrete sort of person. I'd like to see more recognition and support for the not-for-profit organizations that are not driven by, ROIs or immediate returns, the longer-term thinking. So via the public-private partnerships and so on. And I'd also like to see in the midst of the excitement, not reinventing the wheel in every country or in every region or in every project, so that we that's how we accelerate. We need to learn from each other. We need to have some repeatable processes, best practices, whatever standards. So let's not reinvent the wheel if we really want to get there.
Absolutely. What a great message for us to wrap up on. Thank you so much to all three of you for joining us and for supporting the Pavilion. Now, if you're interested in some of the conversations that we've been having, please do check out the chat. There's some great links that have been posted in the chat. So please do check those out.
Yes, lots and lots of links to podcasts and all kinds of initiatives and things. So thanks very much indeed. Hey, listen, we're at the business end of things. We're coming to the end of the Pavilion, coming to the end of COP, coming to the end of our time. I'm going to, before we go, I want to hand over briefly to Andy Bennett, one of the co-curators of the Pavilion, with his final thoughts. I don't know if Luke is there with you, but we've certainly got Andy, who's going to his thoughts and his sum up. Andy, over to you.
Thank you very much, Dallas, and good afternoon to everyone. So yeah, I'm Andy Bennett. I lead on space at KTN, and it comes to me to wrap up this 11 days of inspirational and truly engaging action in just a few minutes. It's going to be tough, but first and foremost, I want to make sure I get the thanks in. So our delivery partners, they've been absolutely amazing. And without them, this Pavilion would not have been the size or have the extremely high content that it has had. So they've worked tirelessly to help deliver this activity. So I am going to name them. UK Space Agency, Leo and Beth have been amazing. Space for Climate, the excellent Bryony, who's just been on now, and her colleague Sally. The Association for Geographic Information, Denise and James, for their expert knowledge and support. At the Geospatial Commission, Caitlin and Olive have been fantastic. And at the Satellite Applications Catapult, we heard from Amanda earlier, but also her colleague Tim has been, it's been great. Penelope from UK Space. And then we have the Scottish contingent, the fantastic Ashley, Daniel and Christina. An Ordnance Survey, James and David, thanks to them too. And last but by no means least, Nigel and his team at the University of Oxford and Insta Associates. So I'd also like to thank our commercial partners who've supported us, so GHGSat, Satellite Vu, Esri, Sparkgeo, and our host for today, AAC Clyde Space, hence the nice satellite in the background. We've also had these cross-cutting partners who've been instrumental in getting the word out about the Pavilion, and we've had over 1,600 people registered, so many thanks to them. We've then had 250 speakers over the 11 days. Amazing, absolutely incredible. Chairs, panelists, and presenters have all provided their time, their expertise, and have delivered some absolutely amazing content. Clearly, I can't list 250 people, but thanks to all of them, and thanks for their time and sharing their knowledge. Remember, you can go back and watch any of the shows on demand. They're on the site for 90 days and then on our KTN YouTube channel after that. Finally, a few more thanks. Our backroom staff who make all this happen. Particular note to Anita from our events team, who makes sure all these sessions run smoothly and communicates with all the speakers, and also to Andra, who has been instrumental in all the marketing, all the communications activity around this. We've had some key messages, and I wanted to just run through the things that have resonated with me personally with the Pavilion. So something that Sinead just mentioned now, I thought it was a great phrase. Geospatial acts as the eyes and ears of the crisis. Fantastic. We've understood that climate change, it's people, governments and industry that need to know what's happening, but importantly, where it's happening. And it's great to see that geospatial data is impacting all aspects, or all sectors of society as well. Maps being that invaluable tool to communicate the message about climate change was one of the very early messages that was made by, I think, Denise in the first session. I thought that was really, really insightful. And then I've been excited to see the power and the breadth of and the volume of Earth observation data being created that's been alluded to today by some of our speakers, particularly the likes of GHGSat and Satellite Vu, who are our partners on this Pavilion. And the other thing I noticed was this social sciences aspect, and interesting to see how this topic has been covered across many sessions. So I'm a technologist. I think of technology solving challenges, but actually we need to think about the human, the person on the ground, how they are impacted by this and how they can actually work on the solutions as well. They might be providing more useful data to us as well. And we need to consider how they react to the different interventions. And how do we communicate best with those people when there is an adverse event happening? How do we get that message across? I think maps clearly are one of the answers to that. And finally, collaboration. It's been mentioned in almost every session, which is great to hear, because this is all about collaboration. We know we have to collaborate to solve the climate challenge. And we're going to do that together, hopefully through this Pavilion and beyond. So what's next? Well, when we formed this Pavilion, we knew this wasn't the end. This is actually just where we're starting. And we're going to continue a lot of activity after COP finishes. So over the coming months, you're going to see a number of activities aimed at getting the message out there further to a wider audience. So we're going to run a podcast series. We're going to develop an interactive publication, and we're going to create some short video content to really get some of those real highlights that we've heard from the weeks out to a wider audience. We'll also be following up with many of you who've attended the sessions and connected on the platform, because we want to ensure those initial conversations that you've had turn into collaborations. That's what we do at KTN. We try and create these new collaborations cross-sector and across different organizations and between public and private as well. So we'll hopefully be introducing to people who have been part of this Pavilion, but also outside it through our big network into transport, maritime, infrastructure, you name it. So please get in touch with Luca or I to get connected with anyone who attended, speakers, and those who didn't attend as well. So talking about Luca, I wanted to give my final thanks to him. It's his perseverance, his idea to kick this off in the first place, and we would never have got further than that idea if it hadn't been for his efforts. So over 18 months of effort has gone into this, and it particularly intense last 4 months, I have to say. So many thanks to him, and I'll hand back to Dallas and Suzie just by saying, like, let's continue connecting for positive change. We need to do this to help us build these solutions to climate change. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Andy. As you say, this is just the beginning of all the collaborations that have started over the last few weeks. We look forward to seeing the products of these collaborations over the next years to come.
Definitely, yes. And thank you very much to all the speakers who've taken part, certainly during our sessions. We've found it absolutely thrilling, and you've all been absolutely brilliant. So thank you very, very much indeed. And thank you to KTN as well. Thank you to Luca and to Andy for having us. It's been an absolute privilege to be able to present some of these sessions. So thank you. If you find yourself in Edinburgh tonight, you mentioned the Scottish contingent. We'll be doing some stuff with the Scottish contingent a little bit later on if you find yourself near the convention centre here in Edinburgh. But from Suzie and myself, leaves us just to say goodbye and thank you very much indeed.
Bye.
We'll see you again. Bye.